Now that the buggy-filled Battlefield 5 beta, wow, try saying that 5 times fast, is over, I wasn't going to do a review of the beta, I mean demo, because I thought it would be the same shit as the alpha, but DICE changed a lot from the alpha to the beta, and not necessarily in a good way. While the gunplay and game mechanics are great, there's just too many animations, too much downtime, and lots of glitches that sometimes overshadow how the game plays. Ironically enough, it seems like a step backwards from the alpha with more content revealed in the beta. If you missed my alpha review, there are some points that are actually still relevant, so link in the description in case you missed it. The thing that keeps bringing me back to playing the game is the gunplay and focus on teamwork. The weapons feel powerful, and time to kill is much better than it was in Battlefield 1, with the lack of bullet spread and predictable visual recoil in this game. You're no longer wondering how or why bullets seem to not be connecting. The STG-44 is a bit too good right now, but I like the time to kill for the weapon, so in lieu of a big nerf to it, I'd want to buff other weapons, especially LMGs, since they don't have the huge clips that we're used to for those type of weapons, and combine it with a mild nerf to the STG-44 to make the other rifles in the assault class more appealing. I never thought I'd be saying this, but the snipers are definitely underpowered for non-headshots, as 55 damage just isn't enough for a bolt-action rifle. It should be closer to 70 or 80 so that enemies are one shot after getting hit by a scout. I also think the attrition mechanic is a really good way to incentivize teamwork and make players think about their choices, as well as cutting down on camping due to low ammo supplies and noticeable lack of nade spam, although that last part might be due more to the map design than the attrition system. I do have an issue with how some of the parts have been implemented, like how primary weapons have only 2 magazines, whereas the pistol magazines are in the double digits, which is a head-scratching ammo count balance, and the beta introducing the all-class self-heal pack that can be resupplied from support players or stations around the map, where in the alpha the health regen was very punishing without this health pack, and squad revives weren't to 100% health either. I think a middle ground is needed here between the alpha and the beta, because you don't want it to feel like an inventory management game, nor have it feel like busy work every time you spawn in order to run over to the stations to get supplies like a fat guy at a buffet. And I don't like the ability for all soldiers to have a health pack. I mean, what the fuck is the point of the medic then? There are also new Fortnitification options for building shit on the maps from the alpha to the beta, which makes this mechanic more useful, which I actually utilize when capturing objectives. I build sandbags to prevent me from being shot from a certain angle by enemies. However, since I'm strafing when doing so in order to not stand still to be easily headshot, sometimes I get pulled off of my active fortification, so there needs to be a more lock-on mechanic with a slightly faster build time, but not instant like the hottest game in the world. Now on to the bad stuff. The biggest problem that I have with this game is that when I'm actually playing it, it feels great, but since there are so many goddamn animations and downtime due to the depth in this game, it feels like I'm watching the game instead of playing it. There's an animation in this game for fucking everything. Squad revive, medic revive, bleeding out, more on that later, grabbing ammo or health from either on the ground or a station or a friendly player, falling from heights or parachuting and bracing yourself when you hit the ground, falling from heights and rolling to continue your momentum, falling onto ledges and pulling yourself up, mantling through windows and over walls, getting blasted back by a friendly rocket, crawling on the ground to get on your back, getting into or out of tanks, melee takedowns, barreling through doors, and probably more that I missed. That's a lot of time when I'm not in control of my character, which is completely immersion breaking. Similar in Titanfall 2 when they had animations for executions, terminations, and getting into and out of Titans, but on a much grander scale, since these things happen nearly every single life, and sometimes multiple different ones per life. Speeding up the revive animations from the slowest evolution and erosion time lapse during the alpha is a step in the right direction, but revive should be similar to what we had in Battlefield 4 and Battlefield Hardline, where the revive for the person being revived is almost instant, but the onus is on the person performing the revive in order to do an action that takes up time, so the people aren't in this weird limbo state where you're helping someone back up, then are back to square one again when that person is inevitably shot, which is probably the cause of a lot of the bugs that I'll get onto later. This is compounded by the fact that you spend way too fucking long in the song and dance that is the death screen. I hated it in the alpha. It's even worse in the beta, despite them having implemented a skip the bleed out feature. The minimum amount of time from death to respawn is 27 fucking seconds, which normally 27 is a wonderful number, if you know what I'm saying, but not in this case, and it actually balloons to 41 seconds if you're slowing the bleed out versus only 18 seconds in the alpha, since there was no respawn delay once the bleed out was complete and you're back on the deployment screen. That's a 50% time increase, and if you die 10 times in one match of Conquest, which means you played a really good fucking game, because that's a pretty low number, you're spending 4.5 minutes in between dying and respawning. And that's just by skipping the bleed out and immediately respawning every single time, which will almost never happen because you want to get revived. To borrow a phrase from my buddy Knots, that's an absurd amount of downtime, and it's why a lot of feedback so far is that Battlefield 5 is extremely boring. No shit. If you're spending that much time not actually in the game, then you're going to be turned off of playing it, especially with the obscene amount of animations that break your immersion from controlling your character in the game as it is. They're not going to take those animations out of the game now, especially since they spent way too much development resource on designing those stupid ideas, and it's getting worse with each Battlefield game, by the way. But if they can either speed up, or if it can make it not feel like I'm watching the game instead of playing it with these animations, I think it would remedy the problems of the game being kind of dull. There have also been a lot of bugs in the game, and they mostly deal with either the spawning or revive system, whereby if you sometimes cancel the revive, it screws up that down player spawn so that they need to quit the match, or times where it seemed like you were actually revived only to be shuffled back to the spawn screen after you walk a few steps. The no HUD glitch that you've seen me showcase on Rage videos seems to have been only an alpha thing, thank fuck, but there's still way too many goddamn problems with this part of the game loop, and I'm extremely worried about the supposed dragging friendly bodies since we still haven't seen it in action, and it falls in this arena of revive and respawn. I'll get to the respawn screen itself later since I still have issues with it, but onto other bugs. There are a lot of problems with player movement, especially when trying to snipe at any distance beyond 100 meters, as it seems like players are rubber banding like in a drug dealer's pocket, and times when the ragdoll physics seem to apply to living players instead of corpses. This leads me into my next issue, which has changed pretty significantly from the alpha, is that it's much harder to see people even with the outline implemented, because there was no auto spot when ADSing at enemy players to highlight them in this particular build that was in the alpha, nor did the scout class have instant access to spotting flares. It was unlocked at a higher class level. These two things combined made it really difficult to see people, especially in the Narvik map, where it seemed like people were building snowmen with all the fucking white covering their outfits for moving around the map all nimble bimble, and Rotterdam having tons of camping spots and windows of buildings that aren't even on fucking objectives, goddammit, that look onto the streets below. I'd like to have scouts not only be able to have access to spotting flares from the get-go to alleviate some of these problems, but I'd also have the scouts' combat role be that they're the only class that could spot with Q, although it should have just the players show up on either the screen or the minimap, whichever is better, because right now the minimap is useless except when I'm looking at the flag cap radius or for any nearby ammo and health stations, with the periscope gadget giving scouts the ability to 3D spot on both the screen and the minimap. Without having players on the minimap, the airplanes are as useful as a condom with a hole in it, because they're just strafing by objectives that are flashing or just taking guesses at the tiny looking ant things on the ground. This visibility issue is not really affected by the character customization, but we haven't actually seen what that'll entail yet, even though I'll get to that part of the game because it does need an overhaul anyway. Having to back out of matches to go into the company or armory menu in order to customize your soldier or weapon is a step backwards for the franchise. One of the main reasons why I love Battlefield games is because I can instantly change up my setup to counter what's going on in the game mid-match, and this is completely removed with the current UI design. The weapon skill tree system is awful in many ways. There are no stats for the different upgrades, so it's hard to figure out which upgrade you actually want to choose over another. It's non-cosmetic in nature, unlike attachments in previous Battlefield games. You don't know if your gun is any good until you use it a lot and rank it all the way up, because the base version is going to be absolute shite, and there's no way to go back and change your gun attributes unless you make an entire new gun, which is overly complicated, and this whole system is even more restricted than what we had in the past. While we don't know what the micro DLC model will look like, this whole skill tree system smells of Star Wars Battlefront 2, with having to use currency and weapon leveling in order to get upgrades without any negative side effects. Again, going back to Battlefield 4 and Hardline, attachments not only altered the weapon's in-game look, but there are trade-offs that you had to think about when equipping an attachment, and you could change these things on the fly versus having to get an entire new fucking gun that you have to spend more in-game currency on upgrading. I don't understand why they're going with this system. It's supercalifragilisticexpialidocious all the way around. Why do we need to have an armory and company filled with unnecessarily overly complicated menus for things like character and weapon weapon customization, it's a needless feature that sounds like a fresh new idea or something that the marketing team can rally around, but it's a fucking terrible idea. Speaking of awful UI design, not only do we have to back out of the game for shit that was possible to change mid-game in previous titles, but the spawn screen needs some updates. Switching back and forth between the tabletop and squad POV screens has that annoying transition that takes time, plus I can't change classes from the squad POV screen, nor can I see where my squad is in relation to the map and all of my other non-squad teammates, but on the tabletop screen, I can't see the clusterfuck I'm about to spawn into. It's bad UI design if neither menu gives me all the information that I need about my choices and actions. I know I've said this multiple times already in this review, but back in Battlefield 4 and Hardline, there was a tabletop menu with a first-person perspective of the squad mate that you're highlighting from the deploy screen. Why can't we have a version of this to avoid all the back-and-forth fuckery between the two incomplete views? Another thing that has changed for the worse is the communication menu and calling in reinforcements as a squad leader. Saying it again, once more, in Battlefield 4 and Hardline, there is a way to one-click to get to all of the different things you need to communicate by holding the spot and dragging down your mouse or joystick to yes, no, thanks, sorry, need a ride, get out, get in, need ammo, need medic, request order, although I'd like to add a spawn on me option, but in Battlefield 1 it was changed to be grouped so that there are multiple layers of this menu, and in Battlefield 5 they decided it was better to copy Fortnite and use icons instead of actual text so that you need to know that thumbs up means thanks if you want to commend a teammate for actually doing his fucking job. This combines the multi-layer UI with icons instead of phrases to just make everything even more confusing than seeing the quote that you're going to put in the chat anyway as another piece of indirection. Changing small things for the sake of change isn't good. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Similarly, calling in reinforcements as a squad leader is quite cumbersome as, unlike in the communications menu, once you pick the choice with your mouse or joystick, it is accepted versus waiting until the spot button is released to confirm the choice. Again, bad UI design. These should be identical at least, no matter which way you choose, although I'd opt for the former versus the latter, where you have to confirm your choice versus when you accidentally swipe left instead of right. Damn, that's a fucking awkward date. The amount of times that I accidentally picked the tank or put the rocket off the map entirely because of this was actually probably greater than the amount of kills that I got with the rocket and all the time playing the fucking game. Bottom line, this game has a long way to go if it wants to be the quote live service that it claims to be, because with how the game is currently paced, people will be more bored than a slam poetry night at a community college within the first few weeks. When you're actually playing the game and not waiting for an animation to finish or staring at the bleed out, respawn, deploy sequence, it's a solid shooter game, but there are so many issues with the game right now that even pushing back the launch by 1 month seems futile, especially given the list of features that is being added to the game post-launch is growing like a dick on Cialis. Every single build is worse than the last, not necessarily in terms of putting more bugs into the game, but by revealing their hand and things like progression and the customization system, which are bad ideas, along with making bad changes based on user feedback. I don't have a good feeling about this game, and that isn't even taking the PR disaster with other gamers into consideration. I do, however, think it's a better game than Battlefield 1, but not quite up to the level of the previous Battlefield titles yet, although there is opportunity here if DICE makes some changes, because like I said, when I'm actually playing the game, it's a really good game. Have you played the beta, and what do you think? Let me know in the comment section down below. I've been the Schwans27. Make it like a tree and getting the fuck out of here. Until next time.